Hello and welcome to episode 186 of our SAP on Azure video podcast. Today is March 22nd, and together with Robert and Goran, we are here to talk about anything related to SAP and Microsoft. Hello, everyone. So in the past, we had talked about Copilot and the integration to SAP data. We showed how to retrieve flight data from the famous S-Flight data sample on the SAP side. We talked about single sign-on, and we also showed how to create a Copilot using Copilot Studio that allowed you to create a sales order in the SAP system. In all of these scenarios so far, we were connecting to an SAP ECC or an SAP S/4HANA system, but obviously there are also other SAP backend systems being used by our customers. A very popular one is SAP Business One. To show you how Copilot can work with Business One, I'm happy to have Moshe and Richard back with us on the podcast. Moshe has created some very impressive demos, and I'm really looking forward to seeing them. Moshe, Richard, welcome again to the show. Before we go into the topic, can you maybe quickly introduce yourself?
Moshe, you go first.
Okay, no problem. So thanks for having us again, Holger. I'm Moshe, and I live in Germany, and I'm heading a Cumulative Service, which is a company that provides SAP Business One based implementations to mostly partners within the European Union and outside the European Union. So most of the implementations that I do involve Azure, the Power Platform, and I'm really looking forward to showing you what we have on our plate today.
Perfect. Thank you, Moshe.
Great. And so I'm Richard Duffy. I am the CEO of SMB Solutions Cloud Services. Amongst my many hats, SMB Cloud Services is an SAP Business One cloud hosting provider. So we provide infrastructure for partners and customers all around the world. We have customers all around the world. And prior to me doing this, I spent 13, 14 years working at SAP as the Business One global product evangelist and so on and so forth. So
really
Business
cool.
One, it's sad to say, Business One is my life.
Perfect. So maybe actually then you are the best expert here to talk about SAP Business One. Maybe to kick us off, Richard, can you quickly explain what it is and talk a little about the infrastructure, the foundation basically of what we'll see later on with Moshe?
Yeah, for sure. So just quickly, for those of you who've gone, well, I've heard of SAP, but I've never heard of SAP Business One. Depending on who you talk to, more than 80,000 customers around the world, countries around the world use SAP Business One as their ERP system, their system of record. And it has been around since, well, it's been an SAP product since 2003. So if you're going, wow, I didn't even know that was the case. Part of the reason why SAP can say they've got so many customers is because a big chunk of them are actually on SAP Business One. And so SAP Business One also runs on SAP HANA, and of course also runs on Microsoft SQL Server. So, as we go through these things, and when I'm going to hand over to Moshe and he's going to show you the magic, the thing to bear in mind is that it doesn't matter whether you're running on HANA or Microsoft SQL Server, what Moshe is showing you is applicable. Because with SAP Business One, there is a layer of infrastructure, or a RESTful API, if you like, which is called the service layer. Mm-hmm. And it's the service layer that you are connecting to when you're using Microsoft Copilot, where Moshe is going to show you things like building the Power Automate flows. So not to steal his thunder, but he's going to show you what you can do with Copilot Studio. But then Copilot Studio is actually going to talk to the Power Automate. So you're going to be talking to the Power Platform in the background, and it's Power Automate flows that actually feed the data in and out of SAP Business One. And it uses the service layer for that. So if you've got HANA, if you've got SAP Business One, and you're on at least version 10 feature pack, let's say you want to be on feature pack 2305 at least, you'll have access to the service layer. And not only can you do all of these things that Moshe is talking about, but many other things that have, if you see somebody talking about something you can do with S/4HANA, some amazing piece of technology that you can loosely couple with S/4HANA, here's a little tip. with SAP Business One as well. Unfortunately, the folks at SAP don't seem to talk too much about it, but that's okay. I've got a big enough mouth to cover for all of it. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense. So
no, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm going to shut up now and let Moshe show his magic.
Just one thing. So I really think this service layer piece, I think that's really one of the most beautiful things there. I mean, obviously the whole business with the business processes in SAP Business One are also fantastic, but this service layer piece is this magic key that allows you to access Business One, which then obviously I guess it's also used when you connect from the business technology platform, the BTP to Business One, but it's the same key that allows you to extend these scenarios with the Power Platform, with a Logic app, with other Azure services and stuff like that.
Exactly right. And I mean, you know, you've got OData 4 compliant data services in the service layer as well. So, you know, if you want to start doing things with Power BI, I mean, basically any time you're thinking, this project needs a RESTful API for me to connect to the back end, then when you're looking at SAP Business One, you're thinking about the service layer. And of course, there are other components that Moshe uses a lot when he's building some of these really sophisticated flow-based applications for his customers that all run either on premises or in the cloud. Things like the Business One integration framework, okay, or B1I, which also then connects to the service layer. So you've got all these different components, but really when you're thinking loosely coupled, when you're thinking RESTful APIs, you're thinking about, and it's a whole other piece of technology that as a customer, you need to wrap your head around and make sure your infrastructure handles it. But as many people are saying now, this is the advantage of cloud, of putting your solutions in the cloud, is that you don't necessarily have to worry about managing all of that. That's where we fit in. That's where Azure fits in. That's why it makes sense to be utilizing a cloud platform for these things. But at the risk of being offensive to some people, you don't have to be in the cloud. Your SAP Business One doesn't have to be in the cloud. You just have to have the service layer, and it has to be accessible through your firewall.
That's okay. I mean, we are the SAP on Azure podcast, so obviously we want customers to run on Azure. But as you said, and what we'll see from Moshe, we really try to look at the holistic integration point of view. And in this case, now we're looking at Copilot Studio. We're looking at the Power Platform to integrate. And yeah, not everything can run on Azure, so that's perfectly fine. But we try to show on this podcast how you can best benefit from using SAP technology and using Microsoft technology, and it will not always be all on Azure. So that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
But today I'm going to show you a lot of stuff on Azure as well. So it's not just about the Copilot.
Then let's hand over to you, Moshe.
Okay, sure. So I'm going to share my screen. Just while you're doing that, Moshe, let me set the stage. Holger, in your opening comment, you mentioned the scenario that you'd already shown with S4HANA. And I think it's fair to say that's what actually triggered Moshe and I to look at this, because we said, okay, hang on, they've shown all this stuff you could do for S4HANA. What's the best way of actually showing, at the risk of sounding like me too, that you can do the same thing with SAP Business One? So Moshe is going to take you through a very similar scenario of doing inventory inquiries and then you know, using Copilot and then creating sales orders. So
cool,
thank you.
So let's start with a little bit of a high-level design, showing the famous slide by Microsoft about the Copilot Studio architecture. So as we can see, for our audience, the ones who haven't gotten the chance to actually take a look at this, we can see a lot of moving parts when we talk about the Copilot Studio, and we can see the integration capabilities, and we can see the different channels where we can deploy our bots eventually. But if we look at this as a whole, so everything is built on top of Dataverse. So Dataverse is basically the underlying database or where the solution is running. and we all know that it has its own application layer, so it's pretty robust. But what I would like to most focus today is about three things: is about plugging actions, dynamic chaining topics, and of course what's in between, which is the dynamic chaining basically, and of course what's in the back end, which is Power Automate and Cloud Flows. We do need to remember that Copilot Studio is basically a rebranding of PVA, which is the Power Virtual Agents that we all know. And those of us who used to work with Power Virtual Agents, I personally didn't work with Power Virtual Agents, but I do know a thing or two about Power Virtual Agents, is where we had to, when we started working on topics, we had to orchestrate the structure and the routing of the conversation. And we had to think about phrases, and we just had to think about all the kinds of phrases that the user is going to be utilizing when they're going to be interacting with our bots. This is no longer the case with dynamic chaining, but I do remind our audience that it's still in preview mode. But the way that it looks to me now, it looks really good, pretty robust. And it's a pretty good thing to show because it actually does the routing for us. We don't no longer need to think about all the scenarios. And I combined this thing today also in my demo so I can show you how this dynamic chaining feature, I'm going to show you first how to turn it on, how to switch it on. And secondly, what it does in real time when it's interacting with our backend systems or when it's extracting the data that we wanted to extract. And it's basically something that the Copilot is doing for us. And that's the real AI magic today. So that's basically the high level design of the Copilot Studio. If I go a step further to my solution, so this is basically the solution that I designed. It's a simple scenario, but it shows everyone how we can harness the power of AI and Copilot as an IDE to basically deploy these smart bots. And in my case, I wanted to show you how it's working with Teams. Today, I can't show you how it's worked with Teams for technical reasons, but eventually Teams is one of the channels where we can deploy the bots. So the user is basically going to be interacting with Teams, and then these inquiries will be federated to the Copilot Studio in the background. And then, as I mentioned, we have topics and plugging actions. I'm going to be showing you which both of them together. And once the topic and the plugin action, they decide on what action needs to be executed, then in my case, in that particular scenario, I'm also calling Microsoft Azure OpenAI service. You'll see how I take a string, which is a prompt that's coming from the user, and I extract specific information from that string. I return it back to the Copilot Studio, and then I'm using that string in order to call Power Automate, my cloud flows, which subsequently call the service layer of SAP. They do the interaction with SAP with the service layer, which is an exposed service. I'm not interacting with an on-premise SAP system. I'm interacting with a cloud system, and it's fully exposed. So I can just call the URI and provide the logging information, and then the information is returned back to my cloud flow, and from there to my Teams or to my Copilot environment. So that's pretty much how the architecture looks like. Just another small slide that I prepared is a good comparison between the plugging actions, which is the new feature for the Copilot Studio, and the topics, which today we can also embed the dynamic chainings into. So for plugging actions, we can, as I said, interact with external data, and we can leverage all the AI capabilities that we have in Copilot. We're going to see it in a minute. And then the big let's say, disadvantage of plugging actions is that they offer us some flexibility, but it's still a single operation call to a custom connector, whereas with topics, we can control and orchestrate the flow of the conversation more. And with the combination of dynamic chaining, it's going to be even better, because in this case, the dynamic chaining or the Copilot Studio environment will decide on which topic to call, which is the huge difference to what used to happen in the past. The topics that we used to know are more old-fashioned, but today we're sparkling it with some AI magic, and I think that's the cool stuff, to show the differences between the plugging actions and the dynamic chaining topics. So this is what I want to focus mostly today.
Cool.
So if we go to the Copilot environment, so the first thing to consider when we deal with dynamic chaining, those of you who are unfamiliar with that, is if you go to generative AI, we always want to make sure that the dynamic chaining is turned on. So this is where we turn on these features, and we can also do it individually if we go to the actions themselves. So we can also see that our actions are bound to the dynamic chaining feature. It's not only the actions, but also the topics. In the past, in Power Virtual Agents, the topics and the actions were used to be on this under the same, you could see them on the same screen, but today they're separated, just because of those things that I mentioned about this separation is crucial. It's to understanding what each of those does. But also when I go to my topic, I can still see that it's bound to the dynamic chaining feature. So I get into the topic, and then I always advise to switch on the tracking. So if we switch on the tracking, we can actually see what actions the Copilot is calling. But before that, let's go to the triggers. So again, those of you who are familiar with Power Virtual Agents, we used to use phrases to trigger our flows, but here we can use system prompts where we can describe in detail what exactly we want our topic to do, and AI interprets these prompts and knows how to navigate and route the conversation, or the conversational flow and the branching according to our prompts. So I always said, I had a conversation with Richard about it, and I always said that doing good prompts or building good prompts is mastering AI, because if you know how to build good prompts, you will know how to master AI.
Yeah.
So I always advise the users to amp up on their capabilities, or like own in the capabilities of prompting, because this is where you're going to be successful. So as you can see, my trigger is still the dynamic chaining as a trigger. So I'm not going to get into each step right now. I'm going to do it in a second. But first of all, let me just take a prompt, and I'm going to just put that phrase here. And basically what I'm asking the bot is, can you please show me the stock levels? And then I'm just adding some part numbers. They're separated by commas, and then I'm executing the bot. So I'm doing this, and then I can see right now, or I will see in a second, how the Copilot is basically, just a moment, let me see, how the Copilot is basically executing the commands. I can actually see which commands or which let's say branches were involved, and then I get a result here, which is a fairly nice result. I can see those part numbers that you can see that I've submitted 4 part numbers, but it only returns 3 because only 3 had results to show. So I'm showing it with an adaptive card, and that adaptive card interacts with the users using buttons. So I could always tell the user to use natural language. And in this case, I want to do it more fancy. So I'm showing it as an adaptive card. And in this case, if the user elects to, let's say, drop a sales order in SAP, so we can just say, okay, so I want, I'm going to intentionally type in a wrong customer code, and then I'm going to select a quantity, just to show you how I work with real data. So if I hit create sales order, then I can see the dynamic chaining in action. I can see how it's parsing the information, and information was returned from the service layer. So I'm parsing the error message returned from the service layer saying, look, you've chosen the wrong card code. So it's not the right card code. So are you willing to do, and are you wanting to do any additional operations? So if I select yes, and I'm let's say that I want to try again, and this time I'm going to select the right customer code. Again, I'm going to get into the actions in a minute. So it's returning the same adaptive card, and I'm putting the customer code here, and I select a quantity, and I just hit create sales order. And if I do that, I get that my order was successfully created. And if I go now to SAP, and I want to see how my order, or if my order was created, I'm going to authenticate. And here we're going to be able to open the client. And we saw that order number 977 was created. And just go to the last record, and I can see that order 977 just got created in SAP. So we have an order. And of course, we can take that scenario and we can further enhance it by asking the user for other stuff, or by showing other adaptive cards, and by, we can make subsequent transactions and make this entire thing interactive. What's good here? What's good here is that we can also, using the Copilot Studio, we can also see what happened behind the scenes. So behind the scenes, of course, we have cloud flows. But before we get even to the cloud flows, how did we manage to get that string in a way that the backend understood? Because again, SAP doesn't understand about these things. So how could we do that? So it's important to know that there's another AI service that we can use, which is the Azure AI Studio, or the Azure OpenAI Studio, that has large language models that we can use or deploy. And one of the coolest stuff with Copilot Studio is that it could be seamlessly integrated to Azure OpenAI. So we can deploy a model onto Azure OpenAI Studio and just call it from within Copilot Studio, and it's working seamlessly. So what I did in this case, I just used the extract entities from text. I can just go here to my Azure OpenAI Studio, and I can look at the endpoints. I can get my API key here, and I just can use that service and provide instructions on how to extract my text.
Yeah.
So let's see how the. Sorry, Holger, did you say something?
No. I'm just confirming. Nice. Yeah.
So basically, the one thing that we need to do in Copilot Studio in order to make that happen is, again, to go to the plugging action. So this is why it's separated from the topics. So I can create a topic. So let's go to my stock inquiry action, to my plugging action. And I can see here that I'm, first of all, I can bind it to a Cloudflow. So it asks me to create a Cloudflow and bind it to that Cloudflow. And as you can see also here, the dynamic chaining option is something that I can switch on and off based on what I want to do. And again, the prompts, which is very important. So we provide the description, and here we provide the inputs and outputs. So in my case, you can see that I'm using a cool feature here that's called entities. So basically, you can see that I ask Copilot to take an identity and use a pattern to let's say identify the contents of my string or my substrings. So the entities is something in this case that I can go, and as you can see here, I'm using a pattern or like a regular expression that I can add here, and then I can call it from within the flow. So this is one thing that we can do when we work with these plugging actions. So in this case, in the case of this plugging actions, I'm using that particular entity. And for the outputs, in this case, you can see that I have all sorts of ways of showing it. But in my case, I'm returning it as a normal response from the Cloudflow to my topic, and then I'm parsing the information there. I took the road less traveled, but I want to show everyone how exactly this works. So we go again to plugins, and I can see that I have 3 actions. So basically, the first thing would be the Azure OpenAI. So the Azure OpenAI is just a cloud flow that I'm calling in order to extract the strings. So here I'm using the user's prompt. And if we go to the topic itself here, I can see that first I'm getting I'm activating the trigger, then I'm getting the user prompt. I'm saving it in a variable that's called user prompt, and I'm using activity.text. So it's very also important to say that most of the formulas or all the formulas are going to write here are in PowerFX. So those of you who are not familiar to PowerFX is the one that we're using here in order to interact with our or to write formulas basically. And then we get the information into the variable here. And this is where the action, this is where I say to the topic, call my Azure OpenAI action and use that user prompt in order to send it as an input to the Cloudflow. So if I go to the Cloudflow and I look at my Cloudflow, this is the one that I executed just a few minutes ago, I can see exactly what went in and what I got from the Copilot. So again, this is my prompt. And here I'm using some variables and line breaks and all kinds of manipulation that I'm doing to the data in order to be able to send it to the backend. And then I get a result. I save it in a variable and I send it back to the Copilot. So basically, if I edit the flow just for a minute to show everyone, so I'm just doing a little bit of manipulation here, and this is where I provide my instructions to the Azure OpenAI service, the one that we just saw here. So this is where I provide my instructions, and I play with the parameters, and then everything that gets sent from the Copilot is being parsed, and then I get a response, and the response just looks like that. So whatever I got from that long string is basically what I'm sending back to the Copilot, and then I'm using that information. I'm using a parse a JSON operation to parse the results and send them to the adaptive card. And then the adaptive card is something else that I do here with PowerFX, is where I basically add the logic that enables dynamic parameters and placeholders, and where I build the buttons and I parse the information into the adaptive card using PowerFX. And that's really cool because it enables us to iterate and perform actions on our results, on the outputs, and we can enrich the data, and we can make sure that that we can build these fancy adaptive cards using PowerFX. So that's a really cool feature that we can use in Copilot. And this is exactly where the magic of dynamic chaining is happening, because when the user clicks the create sales order button, I don't have to do anything. Copilot just decides, it knows that it needs to call that action. I don't need to tell it go and fetch the create order action. It just goes ahead and does that. And this is where I do all the mapping. I add the parameters, and the Copilot selects the create order automatically by using the dynamic chaining feature, and then the create order is created, and all the rest of the conversation is being handled accordingly. So I can do a lot of stuff by using that dynamic chaining. So in this case, I used the dynamic chaining to create an order, because this is what the action, or the submit action in the button was referencing. So I wanted to use that one. But again, you can take that and you can leverage that into so many other places in your business. And if I were to add a bunch of more steps, like creating deliveries or creating other actions. So I think that by using all this power, you can definitely let your users, this power of working both with cloud flows, whatever you have in the back end, which in this case it's SAP, and what's in between, which is the Copilot and all these dynamic chainings activities. I think this is really a really great opportunity for users to leverage business activities. One last thing that I didn't discuss was SAP itself. So the cool thing about the service layer that Richard was mentioning is that the service layer enables us to inject queries into the service layer. So I can, if I go back to SAP Business One and I go to the administration module, and just to show you quickly how it looks like, so we can go and see that here there's a service layer query that I pushed into to the service layer, and then I'm using that query here when I want to create the order. I'm using that query with placeholders or with parameters, and this is basically the one that I'm using in order to get the stock information back from SAP. So I'm fetching the part numbers, and then I'm using that the part numbers to no, I'm going to go to the other flow. Sorry, I want to go to this flow and show you how I call that query. And I call it straight away like I do any other HTTP call. So you see I'm calling that query, and I'm passing the parameters here to the query. And that's the real power, because these parameters are coming from the users. So that's the combination between the service layer and Power Automate and Copilot Studio and all these moving parts that enable us to get that result eventually. And if I were to run it again, you'll see also it's relatively fast. It's relatively fast. So pretty much all those actions are happening, and immediately you get a result. So it's pretty fast reaction. I'm sure it's going to even get better.
No, perfect. Thank you so much. And then I just want to highlight, I mean, this is a really impressive scenario. And I mean, you're showing this in Copilot Studio, but as you said, you could have also deployed this to Teams. You could have deployed this to other channels, so that the user experience would not be, this is more like the developer view that you have, but for an end user, you would have deployed this to Teams, and then I could interact this like in any other channel, and I would see the adaptive card in Teams. I could select the different create sales orders or whatever, but it's just that, yeah, there are currently a few, since this is preview, there are a few issues.
Yeah, there's a few glitches right now, but I can definitely, as you can see, I already deployed it to Teams, so I can make another attempt, but I can also add it as an app. But in this case, it's not really. I can see that the SAP assistant is there, but and I can also manage it in my own apps here. But there's a problem right now with publishing things to Teams, but it's something that we're going to resolve eventually. But you can just use it in Teams, and of course the feel and look is completely different. And
I'm going to just jump in for a second here, because I think this was the thing for me as a person, because I'm not a developer. Okay, I understand what Moshe is doing, but if you sat me down and said, "Okay, you need to build this," I wouldn't have a hope in hell. But for me, the advantage of this was, to be able to see that what has been done, exactly as you were saying, is you can take it, you can deploy it in Teams. I can deploy it as a bot on a website. Yeah. There are so many different ways of taking this one piece of development work and then repurposing it into all those other ways that your users will interact with the solution. And I think the other point that I wanted to make as well is that, again, for those of you who might be watching this, you might go along to SAP events. A lot of the time when you see people showing you things at SAP events, you'll actually see there's a little video bar running along the bottom as they're playing back a video and actually imitating that they're doing the demo, but it's actually a recorded video. What you're seeing here is live. I mean, this is, this is live. The SAP Business One cloud environment that Moshe is connecting to is in our data center in Germany. It is the same environment where we currently today have customers who are transacting on the same service layer where we have customers in our multi-tenant environment transacting. So, there's no smoke and mirrors here in what you're seeing for what it's worth. And Moshe, sorry, I lost my internet connection for a second. Did you actually push the sales order through and then show the sales order in SAP?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, we saw that.
Yeah, great. Okay, yeah. I just missed it because my internet went by.
But as you can see, we can deploy it also to so many channels. I chose Teams because it's the most common one, and also today we have the web application of Teams. So as you can see, there's a bunch of steps that we need to follow in order to approve it. But we need also of course the organization administrator to approve the request, but there's a bunch of steps that we need to follow in order to deploy it to Teams. But once it's there, we can install it as an app, and we can just use it straight from Teams, and that's the cool stuff about this.
And for people who are using the SAP Business One web client today, you might be familiar with the Teams integration that exists in there. The deployment process of Moshe's example here is exactly the same deployment process as you're used to with deploying the Teams integration for the SAP web client, which of course also the SAP web client utilizes the service layer off the back end as well. This is all today's technology that is all deployable by customers today. Perfect. Albeit the Copilot stuff's in preview mode. So, for example, in our cloud, we can take what Moshe has built and any customer who is on our cloud, because they all use Office 365, they all have Teams, we can deploy it today for them. So,
let's not forget also that this scenario speaks to a lot of people, because if I'm taking an average sales guy who doesn't have time to log into the system and start pulling reports, just imagine what we can do with this tool, with this way of doing stuff where you can interact with the back end without really logging into the system, pulling information and performing actions like the ones that I've just shown you. It makes their lives a lot easier. We can. What's cool about those adaptive cards, we can even add attachments. So potentially a user can attach a file, and imagine what we can do with that file by processing records and doing mass uploads. Everything through Teams. Everything through whatever channel we decide to deploy it to. So that's the real scenario for real business. It's not imaginary. It's something that people can utilize.
Yeah. And I mean, I wouldn't go as far as that this will replace all the user interaction, but I think for a lot of users, it can become very normal to just have an interaction like what you did,
Yeah.
that you just wrote about a sales order, and then you were guided in Teams potentially to create the sales order. And yes, there will be others that will open up the web client, that will click through this because they are maybe professional users or something like that. But this one, what you showed here, opens up really a lot of additional possibilities how users can interact with an SAP Business One system.
Yeah, I'm not saying that you can't, you don't need the fat client anymore. You will need always the fat client. But if you take specific scenarios like the one that I've shown you, and you limit the user, because let's not forget, we do need to use AI responsibly and appropriately. So I'm not saying let's expand it to all the business transactions, because it's impossible, at least now, with today's tools, but I'm pretty sure that we can limit it to certain transactions or actions where that can reduce considerably the time that users put in with logging in, pulling reports, manipulating data, and we can do it for them with AI.
And it's being done. The point that I would make, is like Moshe said, you don't have to log in. Well, actually, all of that is done in the background, so it is secure.
Yes,
it is secure, and it is all authenticated, and what the service layer in SAP Business One is doing is it's making sure that all of the rules and the business processes that you have deployed in your Business One system are being followed, and they're being enforced. And then the other scenario with this as well, the fact that you could take this and you could put it into a chatbot on your website. So on an e-commerce website, if you know that the customer is coming in is going to be a cash sale customer, the customer code is already predefined. The customer just asks the question, gets the stock levels, puts in the order quantity, and hits create sales order. I mean,
which is something Copilot helps you to do. You can publish it to a customer's website through the Copilot as well. They have predefined instructions. So that's why I like it as an IDE, because it's a one-stop shop where you can do everything. And I'm just eager to see, I mean, just Holger, one of the options that are currently, first of all, you spoke about security. So basically you can also use security here. You can apply OAuth 2 authentication to users. So Copilot also addresses the security issues. If you want, as a developer or as a builder, to apply authentication on your bots, you can do that also through Copilot. You can apply it through here. So that already exists. And another thing about upcoming features, if we go to the actions again, since I used adaptive cards, so you can also see here, Holger, that here, if I go again to the actions, and let's take this one, and the upcoming features, you see there's something that is great here. So Microsoft intends to also help us to dynamically generate that adaptive card using AI.
Nice.
So I'm really eager to see how this, because I had to write a lot of code here. Not a lot of code, but I have to write some code in order to create this. And we do have those tools where, like the adaptive cards designer, where you can drag and drop stuff. But
if AI helps you to auto-generate these cards, that's even...
But this is an upcoming feature that I'm really eager to see how it's going to help us build fancier adaptive cards. And these adaptive cards is the real thing, because this whole scenario started with this prompt, but everything else, I'm using adaptive cards. So
you can tell Moshe is a fan of the technology. We all sound like a bunch of fanboys, but I think the advantage here, Holger, as you look at it, Moshe's background, he didn't talk about this in his introduction, but he actually comes from a business background, being actually a supply chain manager. And my background was actually implementing ERP solutions. So, when Moshe and I get excited about it, the reason is we can immediately see how this can be applied in real world scenarios, because that's what we've spent our lives doing. Is being in those environments, dealing with the kinds of challenges that these tools are going to enable developers and low code, I call them, like, let's call them low code developers. It's going to enable them to do as well. So
no, I think, Richard, that's a fantastic closing word.
Yeah, I think so too.
There's and Moshe, you showed some additional, or you hinted on some upcoming functionalities. I'm sure this was just the starting point, and we'll see more and more of scenarios and also capabilities. So I'm looking forward to staying in touch with both of you to see where this whole thing is going, and then to also see some new projects in the future from you.
Yeah.
And I would just, if I can throw in a quick plug. Sure. The upcoming SAP SME summits are happening. There's one coming up in April in Phoenix in Arizona, and another one coming up in Madrid in Spain, also in the later part of April. Both Moshe and I will be there, and you will just come and visit us at the SMB Solutions
see this live then,
stand.
In person maybe.
Yeah, you can come and see us in person, and Moshe will be there and we'll be demonstrating this again, and we'll be there to talk to people. Admittedly, that audience is probably more of a sales kind of audience, but if you're a salesperson like me with delusions of technology understanding, come and have a chat to us and see how all this stuff works.
And I intend to add more
features.
It's a hot
topic.
To it. I'm going to add more features to it because I intend to also combine some events also in the system. So I'm going to combine it with events. So it's not the last word.
Don't promise too much, Moshe, because we've only got 2 weeks before the the first event.
That's the advantage with relatively low code.
No, perfect. Sounds fantastic. And so if you are at these events, make sure to stop by at Moshe and Richard and ask them a lot of questions. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for both of you for joining us. Thanks, Moshe, for this great demo. I know you spend a lot of time to polish it and to make it work and look like this. So thank you so much. And I'm sure we'll see each other again.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Holger.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.